Welcome to another edition of the Showbox Sires series on the introduction of new bulls for the Showbox Sires program. Today, we're excited to introduce our second bull with our partners, the Semex Alliance, and we're quite excited to introduce to you 744 HO 00201 Heath, a tattoo son out of the world famous Doc Have Not 8784. Today, we have several guests to talk about the pedigree and where the bull comes from, to introduce this bull to the world. My partner in Showbox, Mike Duckett, who dealt with the cow and has worked with both sides of this pedigree. Paul Trapp, the sire analyst from Semex that we work with extensively with our Showbox program and has been in this business for many years and has a great wealth of knowledge of the pedigrees and the cows in Heath pedigree. We'll also have information from the breeder of this cow family from the start, Frank Regan of Regan Crest Farms. Frank will talk a little bit about the influence that Della, who is about 8 generations back in this pedigree, the influence that Della has had on his breeding program and breeding programs around the world. Frank.
We decided to take off a day and go to the Wisconsin Championship show. We got there probably about 12:30, and the 2-year-olds were just in the ring. And my dad was with me, and I seen this black 2-year-old come around that would catch your eye. And you had to love the udder. It was high wide and shallow and great legs. And that day she placed second and best udder. So after the show, I followed her back to whoever owned her, which was Bob Snow. I kind of asked him about her, and I guess I kind of realized that we probably couldn't afford that cow at that time. I put in for a Black Star daughter. That was kind of how I got to know the cow and got to talking with Bob, and he took her home, flushed her, and about a year and a half later, I went to a friend's sale up in Wisconsin, and it was pretty close to where Bob lived. And I thought I'd stop in and take a look at her. I think it was like in November, and she was due right around Christmas. I went in there, and Bob was there in the barn, and she was standing in a stall dry at that time. And she was long enough that she stood over the gutter. Bob had a grate there over the gutter, so she wouldn't have to stand in it. And I told Bob, I said, Bob, I'd just make a pen for her if you can, because, the further they get along and going to calve, the harder it is for them to get up. So Bob made a pen there in the corner, and I knew she was due in right around December to Stardell Winkin. I guess that was it for a while, but, she was a Mark Bell cross. And I had been talking with Charlie Will at the time there at Select, and he kind of liked that cross too. We kind of waited, until maybe, I guess it was right before spring show. Bob had her entered. I looked at her, and he said he was going to sell her after the show. So we made a deal on her, and I guess that day she was grand champion and best bred and owned and best udder of the show. So she had a pretty good day to start out our career. But after that, we took her home, and about a week later, the Japanese were there. They wanted to buy 2 bulls out of her. That always made a guy feel a little better about buying a cow like that, because we hadn't had much experience with it before, and that kind of made you feel better anyway. After the show there, they wanted us to take her up to, you got a question here, how was she to work with? She was full of life. We took her up to Gay's Mills there. They took some pictures for the Wisconsin News. They took the halter off her, and I thought, wow, how's that going to work? By golly, they got the picture taken, and it took us about 20 minutes to catch her. Luckily, there was a place there where there was a corner in the fence, and we could catch her. But one of the things I liked about the cow, she had a tremendous udder, but she had great legs to go with it, and on the smell all the time, I think is pretty important.
So as we kick off our discussion of Heath today, Mike, welcome to the podcast. I know this bull has a special place in your heart because Duckett Holsteins, you and Julie have worked with both sides of the pedigree. Tell us a little about where this bull comes from.
having both Treasure and Doc in one pedigree is a pretty cool thing. The mating of Tattoo and Doc, I think it's a pretty logical, common sense mating of the longevity and the tremendous udders of Treasure and the milk and the genetics that Doc passed along. Just two cows that can work in any situation in the world. Cows that got better as they got older. And we look forward to seeing how these bulls breed.
Well, Mike, you and I were talking this morning about this pedigree and some of the great bloodlines in there and some of the champion cows. Just mention a few of the high-end show cows that fill this bull's pedigree.
The top side with Treasure, obviously, not too many bulls come from a reserve All-American dam in Tokyo, cow that's made daughters, that's been nominated as heifers and milking form. And then Treasure, a cow that we calved in every year, brought her back. She was sixth, then she was third, and then eventually as a 150,000 pound cow, she won Madison. Then on the bottom side with Doc, it goes right back to Della, and a lot of famous cows in both sides of this pedigree.
You bet. And I think the other day, Mike, you and I traced there's 3 different connections to Della through this pedigree, which is pretty unique. We'll talk a little more about that. Mike, one other thing before we move on. While you were scraping barns this morning, it was fun talking to you because you were looking at 2 sisters to this bull. What do they look like?
They're 2 heifers that they're exactly what you would expect from this bull. They're medium, very balanced, perfect rump, great legs with the ideal set. Heifers that you just can't wait to calve them in, because if they put on great udders, they're going to be pretty special young cows.
Well, we're sure excited to see pictures of them and more information on them as time goes on. I'm sure they'll be seen at Duckett Holsteins. Well, Paul, Trapp, we're thrilled to welcome you to our podcast. I think this is the first one you've done for the Showbox Sires series. Paul's been a great friend of mine and Mike's for years through many different roles. Paul is a great sire analyst that's been responsible for a lot of great bulls. He leads the team at Semex now for sire acquisition. Has judged all the big shows all over the world, and certainly a pleasure to welcome you to this podcast, Paul. Tell us a little bit about what you think about the second Showbox bull to be released at Semex.
Well, first and foremost, Tim and Mike, thanks for inviting me to this edition of the podcast to talk about Heath today. And it's certainly a pleasure to talk genetics, what guys that you respect and you admire and you look up to. And Mike and Tim, you've been great friends of mine, role models of mine, and it's a pleasure to work with you at Semex through the extension of Showbox Sires. On the pedigree here, Tim, when you kind of prefaced how to prepare or some questions for this, and the only word I could come up with to try and describe Doc 8784 was a unicorn. In this industry, we strive to have tremendous show cows, or we strive to have females that can breed on. And it's very rare in our industry to find an individual that can combine those 2 attributes. Some cows that quickly come to my mind, back in the 80s, there was a Swiss cow that won Madison 4 times, Improver Jinx, and she was a jam of Jetway, and he went on to do great things in the brown Swiss breed. And the Jersey breed, Veronica needs no introduction. She's done it all. Sons won it all. And Doc is one of those cows in the Holstein breed that I think can be one of those unicorn type of cows. You look into her pedigree, you go back to her 9th, 10th jam, and Della, and that's a cow family I've worked for generations and generations. Della herself was a tremendous dairy cow, maybe ahead of her time with her tremendous udder. And Doc, how many generations later, is a spitting image of that cow. They're both feisty as well. Maybe the modern day productive life term comes through in their pedigree of both of those cows with Doc and with Della. The interesting thing, when you look back at Della, she had over 150 registered offspring. 34 went excellent. 2 of those were 94-point cows, and she had 45 very goods. You look at Doc's offspring, she's got 80 registered, and so far she's got 1 excellent daughter, 8 very good, and I think almost all of those got sons heading to AI, and 3 good plus daughters, and none scored lower. So she's off to a great track record to start with. As you continue to look into her pedigree, different farms have established themselves, such as Cookie Cutter with Man Oh Man Halo, another cow that has over 130 registered offspring, and a lot of those 23 excellent, 50 rated very good, and multiple ones at 94 points. And one of those 94-point daughters took a cornerstone hold at Seamers Holstein and the man-o-man or mogul Hanker cow at Excellent 94 and has done great things for them. So this is a cow family. Whoever's touched it has had success. They've thrived in multiple environments, and not only in the U.S., but around the globe. I affectionately call Doc 8784 a unicorn.
I love the analogy there, and you're right. Well, Frank, tell us a little more about the family and a few of the daughters. You mentioned Black Star and Winkin and some of that. Tell us about 3 or 4 of her favorite daughters that you were involved with.
They were all really good cows. I mean, even that Winkin, I didn't care for that calf, but she went 94 at for Hadwin Place and made really good records. It just seemed like whatever bull you used on her, even there was a couple of trifectas that were really good cows. But Melwood, what we've got right now in our herd here goes back to the Melwood Della. I mean, we have a 93 Iota that's got over 300 out with 3 excellent Montroses, and then a great Granite daughter that's a really good young cow, a lot like Della. We've had the Leadmans there with Leadman Dolly that had patron Debbie Joe. I don't know if you guys remember that cow, but Simons and Rounds has bought her as a calf and developed her. And then there was a Leadman Doris that also went excellent for a friend over here in West Union, Iowa. We had Max, we had Rudolph, we had Elton with Desriel there, which goes to Cookie Cutter and Seamers, Durham and Dante. And then, of course, we had, the Encores. There was Dundee, and he had another brother there that Select had, Dawson's. Dundee was originally supposed to went to Select, but they merged with Sire Power, so they didn't want him at that time. But we had 3 other excellent daughters, and John Irvson had the mother of Damien, and we had Black Star Darlene that had the 95-point Jet Deborah that was really a great cow here for us. So it just seemed like any bull you could use Belle Elton on her, or you could use Encore on her, and they were good cows. I mean, they all had good legs and udders.
Dundee and Durham. Tell us a little bit about the impact those bulls have had in your world.
They're bulls that both done a good job. The Dundees had just a little more depth, but you take them good Goldwins are mostly out of Dundee, so that proved that he could add to the pedigree. And Durham, of course, they were the kind of cattle that could go anywhere. But they done us a good job, and I think for the most part, everybody in the industry liked them.
You bet. And I think they put Regan Crest prefix on the map and then allowed you to do some other things with your breeding program. Mike, when I started trying to partner with Mike on this cow, unfortunately, Mike knew what a unicorn she was, and it was all reflective in her history. But certainly a cow that can do it all, and I think we're so excited to combine Tattoo with her for sure. Paul, on the same front, great breeding cows that you mentioned, sure, there's a lot of them that have made great daughters, but there's not many that will make great sons consistently and for generations. In your work as a sire analyst for the past, dare I say, Paul, 25 years, tell me a little bit about how this cow family, you've got a lot of experience and brought a lot of bulls in from the family. One that made you and I fairly successful in our careers that you got from Regan Crests, but walk us through a few of the bulls, Paul.
One of my favorite bulls to talk about is Regan Crest Dundee, and Dundee is excellent 95. He's actually the highest scored offspring directly from Della, so 95 points is pretty impressive. And a bull that sold over 1 million units of semen and had over 30,000 milking daughters. He was a bull at the time. He was actually scheduled to go to Select Sires, but Select Sires had purchased Sire Power and they had a full brother in Dawson at the time. So he was available and literally had one foot in the car one day. And Frank Regan says to me, "Hey, I got a nice bull if you would be interested in seeing him." So I walked out to the heifer shed and we saw Dundee, and still today, maybe one of the prettiest bulls I've ever seen. The beautiful balance of masculinity and style and the great foot and leg that he possessed. And we got a deal done to bring him to St. Jacobs. And as they say, maybe the rest is history. And it's fun to see that Dundee's done so many great things. not only for his daughters, but how those daughters bred on. I mean, he came along at a time and made a lot of the good Goldwyn daughters were out of Dundee's, which was kind of one of those golden crosses at the time. You know, if you look back at Della herself, she's probably between Dundee and Durham and her other sons, probably over 100,000 milking daughters out of those bulls. And then you include some special bulls like Damien, who would be out of the cow family, who's actually a line bred. Della himself, being out of Dundee's full sister, also had a lot of milking daughters and had a lot of success in the show ring. This cow family, probably every major AI stud around the world has probably had a member of this family that goes back to the Dellas or the Man-O-Man Halos or the H family there at Seamers. It's a cow family that sold millions and millions of semen around the world and has done it for a long time. Della herself born back in 1986 and then was, you know, that's almost 40 years ago, and she's still having tremendous impact in the breed today. Is just amazing through her sons, grandsons, great-grandsons, and now we're talking about a Doc herself that's 9-10 generations away from her having a huge impact on the industry.
Well, great recollection of the bulls in that family. And Paul, like you said, hundreds of thousands of daughters, millions of units of semen, certainly customer appeal. Paul, one other thing before I switch back to Mike, but you know, in our time in the AI business, Paul, we've seen so many changes. And how many times in our careers, Paul, has a cow family been hot today and then there's been a change in the system and it's reflected on that cow family, not always positively. Reference Della and this family and what they've done through time, Paul, really eating up change, if you don't mind the way you put it.
Yeah, the cow family has done amazing things as we've had, you know, on my day-to-day job of buying bulls, the formula changes. If you look back at it, I referenced Della herself, born in 1986. About 1984 was when productive life was first introduced in the industry as a trait. And as you talk to Mike and hear stories about Doc, or if you talk to Frank and hear stories about Della, they're tough cows that wanted to live. If they got sick, they fought through it and figured out a way to live. And I guess the modern genetic term is to call that productive life. And that cow family did well for that. That transmits through the cow family. In 2003, daughter pregnancy rate was also introduced into the formulas. And we got to figure out what that was. And many of the offspring and how they're bred have done extremely well for that. Just of note, there was a bull at ABS called Die Hard that still today he's a grandson of Della out of the Task. And he's 4.4 for DPR today. So the cow family knows how to get stuff pregnant. And then in 2006, you look at calving ability came into the formula as well. And many of the sons of the cow family have been known for their easy calving and their short gestation. So it's amazing that this cow family kind of a forefront and a predictor of what could happen into the future. And then you put them into multiple different herds and around the world, and those people bred them how they like their cows, and they've thrived in multiple environments and continue to make bulls and females that are popular and at the forefront of the breed.
Well, they certainly have done that for generations, and I thought the fact that they've eaten up every change is a true testament to this family. Mike, you know, we've talked a lot about the cow. Certainly your life was cut short this fall, which was tragic, but I want to talk to you a little bit about the cow, about the Doc cow, who was the dam of Heath, what she was like to work with. I still reference Mike to start this conversation. Back when Sharon and I were considering investing in this cow, Mike would send us pictures, videos of Doc eating at night when Logan would go out and feed her at the 10 o'clock feeding. And I always admired her. And I know that was one of the selling points to Sharon. You could never see anything but the tips of her ears because her head was buried so far in her feed trough that she just is a hard-working, hard charging cow. And Mike, you know, tell us a little about how it was to work with this, as Paul calls her affectionately, unicorn. You worked with great cows, but tell us about this one.
You know, a lot of people don't realize this, but Doc was born at our recipient farm that we do so much work there. She lived in that 2,500 cow heifer facility until she was 2. Came over by us, and she knew what it was like to live in a freestall barn and fend for herself. A cow that when you bring the feed tub down, either she's going to take it from you or you put it in there and she's going to eat everything and give you back an empty feed tub. cow that she aggressive cow that you cab her, she'll go to 140 pounds just like that. I think over the years we only ever bred her each time one service. She never repeated. And actually, yes, this fall her life got cut a little short with cancer, but the cow was already pregnant, due back for next year, and that's just the way she was. She was easygoing cow, but aggressive. A cow that was tough as nails and always fun to work with.
Oh, and to that point, Mike and Paul, I'll let you comment on this. You know, part of the tragedy of Doc and the shock that we all had in the industry with the cow was the cow was so doggone tough. You didn't know she was sick. The cow was, incredibly tough right to the end, Mike. And I guess that, to me, that speaks volumes, because Paul, you saw the cow 3 weeks before she died. Tell us what you saw that day at Duckett's.
Yeah, I can feel the goosebumps on my skin, as you talk about that. And it's tragic that we lost her. But I did have the opportunity, on a normal visit, going to Duckett Holsteins, and just so happened that day Mike had his show string getting ready for Madison, and all of his crew was there. And then we got to see Doc lead out, and it just gives you goosebumps thinking about how great that cow was and how naturally she, had big rib and that dairy strength and modern frame and moved freely. And then you get to her mammary system, and it was just outstanding. And I remember when you guys told me she was sick, and I just couldn't believe it, that a cow could look that good. I think I saw her on a Thursday, and I think Mike, she got sick on the weekend, and I just couldn't believe that it could happen that fast with her.
But I do think, Paul, that does speak volumes, doesn't it, Mike, about just how doggone tough that cow was. She wasn't going to let anything get in her way. So, Mike, as we kind of start wrapping up this bull, we've got Tattoo on the top side. We've got Doc on the bottom side. As I look at his statistics, Mike, he's got plus milk, fat, and protein, which is nice. He's got really solid type traits, 2.5 type and double-digit type in Canada. His herd life is nice. His somatic cell is nice. And one thing that you and I are looking for in Showbox is that moderate stature. I like the fact that I think he's 0.75 for stature on the U.S. system, and I think that's neat. How do you think this bull's going to breed, Mike?
I think he's going to breed exactly the way we hoped by looking at his full sisters. They're not going to be the big, tall, gangly, narrow-chested heifers that you don't want. They're going to be the square, straight line, hard top, beautiful rump with the correct set to her feet and legs. That one thing Treasure, as a 2-year-old, you'd say, well, Treasure's legs have a little bit of set to them. That cow, she never had any foot and leg issues. With the Jedi in Doc's side, a little bit of that set is ideal. And I think the two cows complement each other well. And I think they're going to be, you're probably not going to see this bull show up on a lot of lists because he's so balanced. He's not 4 points of type, and he's not 3,200 TPI. But if you're breeding balanced cows that can live in any facility, I think that's what he's going to do.
I think it's a perfect description of that. And Paul, I think when you compare him to his ancestor Dundee, which you were very involved with, Dundee never made any list. He was never on the high type list. He was never on the LPI or TPI list, but he made a lot of lists because of the influence he had in breeders around the world. And don't you think this bull is cut from the same cloth and has the same potential?
He does. I mean, we talked about the tremendous attributes phenotypically that the Doc has, and even genetically. But you look at the balance that Tattoo brings on the top side of bull, that, one common theme of this thing is aging. The aging process of this cow family is gracefully. With each calf, they get better. Whether Mike talks about Treasure, or if you talk about Della, or any of the descendants throughout that pedigree, and the Doc the same way. And even on the top side of her pedigree, there's Durham Atlee comes in there. I think Mikey made a mention of some crosses to Durham on the top side, and Durham Atlee comes in there, another cow that was reserve intermediate champion at the World Dairy Expo. And then also through that pedigree, you also get to see one of the most famous cows from Minnesota, Pine Shelter Cheyenne, who was World Dairy Expo champion in 2003. So Mike, when you're talking about the pedigree, I think you're being a little modest, there's a lot of ribbons, a lot of banners. Some of the great cow families are all, intertwined in here. If you want to go off of Durham Atlee, that's Alicia. So you got all kinds of cows that have performed in lots of different environments. But the main thing that comes to me is that they age gracefully and they get better with each time. And that doesn't always mean that you're most extreme on the genetic traits that they're evaluated today.
Fellas, as we get older, aging gracefully becomes more of an important piece of our lives, correct?
You're right.
Well, guys, it's been a great discussion. Certainly the combination of Paul Trapp and Mike Duckett and Frank Regan's comments on this bull add up to why I think Mike and I at Showbox are so excited with this potential of this bull. Mike, any parting thoughts that you've got on how people should use this bull and what you think our conversation in 5 years can be on this bull?
For me, I'm going to use him on those cows that obviously need have a little more balance to them. A cow that maybe a little extreme in the stature, and to bring those down and square them up. And I have no doubt that this bull is going to be a tremendous udder improver. With Treasure and Doc in the pedigree, cows that need a little set to the leg. I think with a lambda heavy, this is the perfect mating on lambdas as far as I'm concerned, to add that strength and length of fore udder. I think this is a great ideal cross on lambdas. We've got a lot of lambdas to breed.
Well, thanks, Mike. Certainly great having you on, and we're excited to see the future of this exciting new bull through Showbox at Semex. Paul, we'll end with you, if you would. You've judged Madison, you've judged Toronto, you just got back from judging Cremona in Italy. Paul, as you think about making the next great show cow, what's it going to take to make the cow for 5 years from today that's going to win, and can this bull do that?
It's been an honor to judge those shows, and that have been great opportunities. And Mike helped me at the Royal, and that was 2 days that I'll always remember. And I've always tried to have guys that have hands on them to help me when I judge, to get that perspective. And one thing that my associates and talking to dairymen remind me of is balance, right? It never goes out of style. You got to have enough production, but you got to have cows that have great feet and legs and really good udders, and they never go out of style. And I echo Mike's thoughts. I mean, there's a lot of lambda out there. I think he's tailor-made for that. There's a lot of Unex blood. There's a lot of Dorman, and a lot of blood out there and Unex as well. Dorman, Unex, and lambda, I think he will work really well on those bloodlines.
Great. Well, a fantastic talk. We hope you as listeners enjoy learning about our bulls, not from a piece of paper, but from the people that have lived this business and lived the cows and developed what has made this great. Truly great bulls come along very seldom, but truly bulls that do become great are used that can influence herds. And we really believe that's what Showbox Sires is about. So we thank you for listening. We're excited to have our second bull released with our partners at Semex. He is exclusively available around the world through your Semex distributor. And we invite you to go to our website, www.showboxsires.com, and review some of the videos. We've just seen beautiful videos of the bull. We've got some wonderful videos of Doc, and Mike will have stuff on the sisters real soon. So we thank you for listening and look forward to talking with you on our next issue of the Showbox Sires Release podcast.